What does this potentially mean for the industry, Jeff?
Well, I think just building on what Phil said, it's absolutely devastating. I think the potential anyway, if we see this escalate all the way up to the 25% by October, I think initially this is something we could see be absorbed if it's really short term, but the uncertainty is really what's at stake here, and I think that causes a lot of jitters across the auto industry.
Who is in the worst position? I mean, which of the big American manufacturing companies are sweating this the most?
I think when you're looking at the imports coming from Mexico into the U.S. in terms of vehicles, full vehicles, not just the parts, the full vehicles, you're looking at more than 50%, about 55% of it is with the Detroit makers. Of those, GM and then FCA are most at risk here, followed by Nissan, Volkswagen, and Toyota. So really it stretches across the industry, and with the exception of a couple of brands like Tesla, no one is really safe.
What does this mean for the auto parts makers?
Goes much further than that. I think looking at those parts that absolutely cross multiple times, you've got essentially most of the major auto suppliers that are in Mexico building parts. You've got about 16% of the parts used in U.S. manufacturing coming from Mexico. So again, it would be a pretty stark situation on the industry overall. You're looking at prices that would be raised across the board. Could be as much as $3,000 on average across every vehicle in the U.S.,
wow.
Which would put a pretty strong hit on demand.
In terms of parts that cross back and forth across the border multiple times, would they have to pay the tariff every time, or do we have any idea at this point?
It appears they would be tariffed every time. So I think certainly, you're looking at the 4 times in that example, 4 times going across once, getting the tariff from the U.S. side. I would have to believe Mexico would reciprocate on the tariff. So you're potentially looking at that getting hit 8 times.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about the implications if this actually, those are the implications if this actually goes into effect.
Right.
Let's talk about the implications that have been put on just by raising this threat, even if it doesn't happen. This has to be creating all kinds of uncertainty for CEOs and maybe having some of them rethink their plans about how they want to deal with this. What happens?
Yeah, no question about it. It's already been a very difficult environment for the auto sector and for CEOs trying to make decisions both in the manufacturing full vehicle assembly, but also in the supply base, looking to where they're sourcing vehicles from, exactly what their strategy is as they're looking much further forward and trying to figure out how they're going to invest in electrification and autonomy. They're looking to make cuts in other areas on the cost side of things, and this throws a massive wild card, I think, into the industry. And the industry is already a little jittery, had a long run here. We're seeing sales have peaked, likely to be down this year as we expect. So I think there's already some jitters there, and this takes it to another level. So certainly uncertainty is the enemy, I think, when you look at the decision-making and strategy setting.
It also creates some uncertainty into what's going to happen with USMCA, new NAFTA. If that doesn't get passed either by the U.S. Congress or by the legislatures in Canada or in Mexico, then what?
Yeah, again, it throws everything into essential turmoil. Likely would see things go back to WTO levels in terms of trade. And yeah, this is something that USMCA getting pushed right now, trying to get that approved. And I think this tariff, which is, again, trade-related, definitely throws some wrenches into those negotiations. And I think really sets a precedent for just a level of unpredictability with this administration as it relates to decisions that have already been made and trying to move forward.